Hi, Siobhan Lindley here, CEO of Women Evolution and the creator of the Forbes interview series, Rising Leaders. I am here today with Dr. Kathleen Rose. She is the president of Gavilan College. And right now, if you haven't had a chance to check out her article live on Forbes, I want you to click the link right now. And after this interview, you're going to have an opportunity to ask Kathleen whatever questions or anything in addition to how her career was built, anything that you want to know more that wasn't answered during this interview or in the Forbes article, you can ask directly. We're going to be doing a live Facebook Q&A session 72 hours after this article hit the press. And so you can put your questions down below so that I can ask her directly for you if you're unable to attend live. But if you like my page, you'll find out exactly when the live Facebook interview will be, and you can ask them to her yourself. But let me give you some background on her. So Dr. Kathleen Rose is the newest and the second female president in 100 years of Gavilan College. And prior to that, she has been serving the California Community College system since 2002, with the past 7 years as the EVP and Chief Instruction Officer at Gavilan College. Dr. Rose was the Associate Dean and Campus Director at Chapman University for 20 years, where she administered undergraduate and graduate programs in Arizona and California at military and community locations. In addition, she has taught as a part-time faculty member for the past 30 years in the undergraduate and graduate level in psychology and organizational leadership at a number of colleges and universities. Dr. Rose is originally from New York, and she moved to California in 1999. And she was a single mother, raising 2 children for most of her time, getting all of these degrees needed to do everything that she's done today. And so thank you for spending your time with me and being willing to share your story with all of us. It's very evident that education has been paramount in helping you get from one level to the next in your career. And you've had to use it to help, and you've used it to help others advance and, be able to gain more opportunities as well. So where does this part of you come from?
Well, first, thank you so much, Siobhan, for selecting me for this interview. I'm so delighted and honored to have this opportunity to be with you. I'm really thrilled to have this chance. So I really see myself as an experimental and kind of an accidental leader. I started out my career to become a teacher, an English teacher. And, in the era that I came through college, you were either a teacher, a nurse, or you stayed home. And so when I came through my undergraduate degree, I looked for ways to get out and have really rich experiences in the world. So there were 3 things that happened that were really significant watershed moments during my undergraduate degree that really became experiential leadership moments that guided me and propelled me into my leadership career. One was working in the migrant education camps in upstate New York, where I volunteered as a literacy tutor and offered opportunities to teach reading in the literacy opportunities for migrant families at the end of their days picking apples and potatoes in upstate New York in the migrant camps. And that was a pretty big experience for me. I'd never had that experience working with migrant families before. And it gave me the opportunity to see what activism was about and what families who were living in labor camps and migratory, moving from Florida and Puerto Rico to upstate New York, what their lives were like, and really what learning to read could do and what education could do for the kids who were coming through the system. And so that reminded me also about the basic needs of life and about how learning to read could open up opportunities for kids in the system. And so that was a huge awakening for me. The second thing that happened was I had the opportunity to go to Attica prison. Yes, the infamous Attica prison in upstate New York. and go with a beloved college professor of mine at the time and teach yoga and meditation in Attica. And if you can picture me with long braids and a guitar and going into Attica every Friday night for 2 years, that's what I did. And it was an outrageous experience. It was one that my parents were really kind of nervous about, if you could imagine being a mom and sending your kid in Attica. But it witnessed for me an opportunity where I saw just, honesty and courage and that thing that happens when your whole life gets turned upside down and you're incarcerated. I just can't even go into how much that changed me. And for almost 20 years after that experience, I wrote to some of the lifers there as pen pals and got to know them and their families really well. And that changed me as a leader, as a emerging leader, as a resilient leader. And it developed me in terms of learning how to provide not only advocacy and resilience, but what my values were in terms of social justice. And then the third experience that happened during those times in my emerging life was when I was in graduate school and I was living in Arizona, and I helped to provide group therapy to children on the tribal lands in southern Arizona who had been victims of incest. And those kids who were there, referred by the system, who were there because they had to be there and referred by the court system, who wanted so desperately to be reunited with their family, really taught me so much about hope and the idea about looking to those in authoritarian positions about how they look to leaders to provide hope and the environment of hope. And I learned about responsibility, the leadership responsibility. So I started out my life thinking I was going to be a teacher, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to be a therapist. I want to be a therapist. And I went to graduate school to become a therapist. But then I was propelled into, I need to do more. I can do more. I have the skills to do more. And I think I'm going to have to be a leader. I'm not going to have a choice. I'm going to have to be a leader. And
you know too much now.
And that's eventually what happened. Yes, I guess that's it.
And you ended up teaching for a bit at an Air Force base where you were the only female civilian as well.
Right. And so that, again, it felt like a propulsion. And I think for women oftentimes, because we're in survival mode and because we have to oftentimes provide for our families and do things for our family to keep ourselves afloat, we do things. And especially if you're educated, you provide environments for your family and you provide opportunities to show symbolically for your children what you can do with an education. And I did that. So I had an opportunity to work for Chapman College, but Chapman College was located on Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. And I had only been on a military installation one other time in the 70s, and that was to protest. And so that was a different experience for me. But when I went to work for Davis-Monthan Air Force Base as a counselor for Chapman College, and then later as an instructor, my whole mindset about military bases, the Air Force, educational programs in general, completely shifted. I gained a huge amount of respect, a huge amount of appreciation, and a huge amount of understanding about the military lifestyle, the great equalizer that education can bring to any environment, and the great opportunity I had as I gained graduate work to teach in psychology and organizational leadership. I just appreciated it so much. And again, at the time I was having my children and raising my children, they got a chance to see what education can do, no matter what your background, your orientation, your socioeconomic status could provide. And for me, it was experiential learning all the way, coupled with life experience and resilience lessons. And the undercurrent of all of that was the idea that I was learning leadership lessons, but because I was in life mode, survival mode, career building mode, I even didn't know at that time that I was becoming the leader that I would eventually become.
And this, this resiliency and this accidental leader and all of that, I mean, you have all this going on professionally, you're raising your children, and it started to have an impact too, though I don't know how, I mean, I'm sure there's millions of reasons why, but the relationship that you were in too started to fall apart, and
Yes.
it made everything shift again.
Yeah, so I was married when I was in Arizona, and then my marriage ended. And when my marriage ended, I knew how to do work really well. I could work really hard. I worked my regular job. I taught as a part-timer at night. I also had a private practice as a therapist. I was trying to hold all of those things together, and I was going to graduate school to start my doctorate at that point. And my personal relationship ultimately ended. And I made a very big decision. I know now, a very courageous decision. And that decision was to get divorced and ultimately leave the state and take my kids, liquefy my life, put all of my possessions in a 24-foot U-Haul truck, including our 2 dogs who fought the whole way from Arizona to California, and move and sell a house and move into a very small rental, the sticker shock from Arizona to California. As many of your listeners and readers will know, it's a huge thing. And to become a newly single mom with 2 kids, 10 and 14 at the time, moving from Arizona to California was a big move. But in my heart, I knew, in my soul, in my psyche, I knew that a clean slate, what I came back on, what I fell back on, was the bravery of the resilience that I had, that I knew that I had the ability to create something really important for myself, first and foremost. And I knew my kids would be okay if I could do what I knew in the deep recesses of myself I could do. And ultimately, I was able to. When we first came to California, the first 2 years were extremely difficult. My kids were latchkey kids, no doubt about it. My kids were not always sure where I was and what I was doing, because I was doing multiple jobs to hold it together. I was working full-time for Chapman University as a center director. I was traveling all around the state for my job. I was teaching. I was leading an academic life. I was also providing some personal counseling on the side to earn more money. I was maximizing my credit cards. I was trying to get my kids in the school system in a foreign land for them, California. I was trying to maintain their relationship with their father, who was still in Arizona. And I was trying to make sure that their life was as normal as it could be for a newly divorced mom and the first in my family to get divorced. So that was not a label that was a happy one for me to have. And so my doctorate at that time, I was in the middle of my doctorate, and that lapsed for a while. And I finally got to the point where it tugged at me so much that I knew I had to go back and finish it. And so long distance between California and Arizona, I did go back and was able to complete my doctorate, which was, it took me almost 10 years before I was able to do it. And my kids were able to be there when I did my final defense and finally completed it. So again, the symbolic aspect of that, I think my kids now are 33 and 28 with families of their own. I would hope that they would say that they didn't mind being dragged along to all these, educational things. But they came to college graduations when they were kids. They came to my doctoral defense. I dragged them along to all these college events all throughout those years. And I think that they have become really fine adults. And I do know, though, that those years and building that experiential, that resilient core, I was building the leadership traits and the leadership attributes that I now have as a college president that I can put in play at this last phase of my career in an extremely meaningful way that I was not even aware of at the time, that I now know I have.
So you've obviously, now you are the president of Gavilan College, but prior to that, for 8 years, you were VP, correct?
Yes.
And so you were working for the prior president who had a very extensive military background. So probably very, very almost, you were used to working in this type of an environment because of your background and experience working in the military back in Arizona.
Yes. So the previous president had been here for 14 years. And so when I came to work at Gavilan College, when I came into the community college system in California, couldn't wait to come to Gavilan. Gavilan has a wonderful, very solid reputation in the state of California. And the previous president had a wonderful working relationship throughout the state. And I was privileged to work with him for my first 7 years here prior to becoming the college president, and learned a lot. He had a very, very solid reputation as a chief business officer and a very solid reputation as a college president. But we were very different people, very different leaders, had very different management styles. He comes from the chief business office background, and I'm a psychologist. He's a Marine veteran, and I went to Attica and taught yoga, so you can only imagine that our styles and our personalities were completely different. And when he retired, he did leave the college very suddenly because of a number of factors. And so because of that, there was no blueprint for me. And that wound up being a little bit of an unsettling circumstance for me, but also ultimately a gift because of my background, because of my move from Arizona to California, because of other life circumstances that I have been able to experience. I'm used to being uprooted, unsettled, thrown into a new experience, and then having to make my way and drive myself based on my own core values, my own core belief systems, and my own core vision. And I have learned how to trust that going forward. And for women, that is so imperative that we learn how to find, as you know in your work, that voice and learn how to rely on that early on in our career. And now at age 60, in the last phase of my career, I now know that I can trust that. And I thank the previous president for that, because I have certainly learned that lesson. And again, now that I've lived through my first year as a college president here at Gavilan, I know that I'll be able to continue to apply that in my work here.
Absolutely. But you weren't just handed this position. I mean, this was a nationwide search that they were looking for, and was narrowed down to 3 candidates, you being, I believe, the only internal candidate.
That's correct. Yes.
And so what made you ultimately apply? Were you nervous to apply? Did you know that that was the job that you wanted to, go after?
Well, I didn't know, because again, as I said at the beginning of my interview, when I went to college, it was you're either a nurse, you're a teacher, or you're a housewife. So I didn't wake up at age 15 and say, yay, I'm going to be a community college president someday. I really have felt moved. I felt moved to become a college president. And particularly over the last 15 years of my career, I have felt that my skill set, my experiences, my decisions have gained momentum, and my advocacy, my belief in education, again, as the great leveler for all students, socioeconomically, basic skills students, career transfer students, students who want career technical education or transfer into a UC or a CSU. Community colleges in the state of California provide an exceptional opportunity for anyone. It's the great accessible opportunity to experience education. And I can be the real Pollyanna poster child about community college education. And I saw it in migrant education, in migrant students in upstate New York. I saw it in indigent Indian populations in Arizona. I saw it in talking to inmates at Attica. I've seen it in the faces of our students here at Gavilan. And I just believe so strongly in the mission of education that when this position opened, I had a doctorate, I had 30 years of higher ed experience, I was completely qualified. The little girl voice in me said, oh gosh, are you sure you don't want to be the nurse, the teacher, or the housewife was already out. The housewife was gone 25 years ago. And so my kids said, come on, Mom, you're 60. You sure you don't want to just kind of slow down a little bit and be ready to bounce those grandbabies we're having on your knee? And yes, I'm going to be around to do that for sure. But I definitely have more to give and more to help to provide to the system. And so I was thrilled to apply, but there was a risk to be the internal candidate, and it came down to three. There were two men in the final, and myself. So I was the only woman of the three, and there was a risk. There was a public forum. I had to be interviewed by our 7-member board of trustees, and ultimately I was selected, and there was a risk in that selection. The college had to be willing to say, yes, we are willing to have you, who we know, step forward into this new role, but our expectations of you is that you're going to dust off the cobwebs of this place, bring the community in, do some things to really move and propel the college forward. And the expectations are not going to ease just because we know you. And it has definitely not been like that. We've done a lot of change this year. It's been a remarkable year.
Even with all of your experience, second guessing yourself, I mean, I can only imagine you've never even seen a woman in this role before. I know they've had a prior female president, but it's been 100 years. And so, personally, and being in these very male-dominated environments and working in the military and things like that, I mean, I can understand. I can understand why and how. I mean, you've probably done a really great job of adapting to these very male-dominated environments, right?
Well, it's interesting because when I was working in Tucson, I had a lot of opportunities to be in rooms with many men who had a lot of things on their shoulders, either birds or oak leaf clusters or other things. And then they would have a civilian woman in there in a power suit, that was me. And I learned how to speak the language and the acronyms, and I could talk toe to toe with these generals and colonels and lieutenants, and that was okay, but there was definitely a common leadership language. And I've learned in my career that if you can talk the common leadership language, the humanistic language, the cognitive language, the affective language, if you can talk about feelings, if you can talk about how people make change, if you can talk about strategic change, if you can talk about how to really drill down into how mindfulness can impact any level of decision making, then it doesn't matter what environment you're in. If you know how to get there linguistically, if you know how to get there and connect with people, I know it's cliche, but it really is truly all about how you build relationships. And for me, the person who at one point in her career thought she was going to be a counselor, I have fallen back on those skills over and over and over again. So throw me in any environment you want. Yesterday I was doing interviews for a position, a really key position, and it's public safety training, a male-dominated position for sure. And many of the interviews were men and police officers or fire. And sure, throw me in that kind of situation. And I find that challenging, and I always am up for that kind of challenge, because it's about taking that common leadership language and applying it to whatever career field or whatever scenario I'm in. But it's about how do you look at the thinking aspect of it, the feeling aspect of it, and the change aspect of it, and then move forward through that. And I've never gone wrong with that kind of approach.
And you've mentioned to me around, if you were going to take this position, if you were going to, kind of dust these cobwebs off and really change and bring the community into the college and just really revive and rebuild and start over, that it wasn't going to be worth it unless you could be 100% authentically yourself in that position and do things almost completely different than the way that it's been done before. And I can see that with, obviously the feminist that you are and the psychologist that you are, and this ability to connect with the people around you and to get on their level, right? And to bring them in with you. I can see how critical and important that was for you to take this step, this big leap, and say, hey, I could retire, I could be with grandparents, but I've got more to give. But if I'm going to give, it's going to be me.
Right. Yeah. And I'm so grateful to have that opportunity. And already the college, we're talking about ourselves in a renaissance time right now. So we're not really blowing everything up, but we're taking what we have and we're looking at things, and we're looking at things in a reflective, almost romantic way. And we are in a renaissance. So we have done some, we have literally dusted off cobwebs. And today you're actually doing this video, and I'm actually in my office. If you had talked to me last month, we've been in swing space. I've not really been in my office, the office of the president, for the first year, but now I am. I don't have my books on my shelves yet, but I'm actually in my office. So we have done some things to really spruce up the campus. And when we had our graduation a month ago, we actually handed out real diploma covers, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really was a big deal. In the past, we've just given scrolled pieces of paper with a little ribbon on them. But this year there were diploma covers, and there were programs that were done on nice paper with, colored pictures in there of the speakers and of the student government president in there. And the student government president got up and said something at graduation that was really meaningful. And we're doing small things, symbolic things, and facilities wise, we are doing things to clean up the college. We have a beautiful STEM meadow now that's indicative of the natural meadows in California that we just opened. And those types of things, in my view, are extremely important to show the community what the college is willing to do to reinvigorate the learning that takes place here. And, it's the end of June, and it's been 100 degrees here in Gilroy all week, but summer school began yesterday. And as I came on campus today, the college is alive. There's all kinds of people on campus today. And that's so exciting to me. After we're done today, I'm going to meet with the football coach. We did a podcast for the first time. You should go on our website and hear my podcast with the football coach. It's hysterical because I know nothing about football. But we talked about leadership. And now next month, we're going to do another podcast with another member of the campus. So now I guess I'm getting into becoming the podcasting president. And so and on it goes, more creative, more innovative, dusting off the cobweb type of thinking. And so, pay attention to Gavilan College. We will definitely be a college on the move in the state of California in the year ahead.
I do not doubt that for 1 second. So now that you're finally here, the second female president in 100 years at Gavilan College history, someone who's undergone, a lot of interpersonal, challenges and trauma. You went through a divorce, single mom of 2, very successful children, and grandmother now. What tips do you have for women who may find themselves in a role that has never been done, by a woman, maybe for a very long time, or if ever?
Well, I think the first thing for me is always put some bookends on your day and take a few minutes for yourself at the beginning and end of the day to check in with yourself. A practice that I have done this year, and I'm going to put a plug in for Headspace. It's a great little meditation app, and I've started that this year. 10 minutes in the morning of meditation has been a remarkable thing for me in terms of really thinking about what lies ahead for me in the day, the week, the month, the 6 months and thinking about that. Checking in with myself is really important. And I've done checking in with myself ever since my Attica days when I did meditation back in the 70s. So that's really important. Then the end of the day, I do a journal, even if it's just a 2-minute, this was what was really a striking point from my day, or this is something that I'm grateful for the day. So a 2-minute, endpoints for me. Another thing that's really important, I think, is an understanding that your gut really does matter. So for women especially, because we're so busy, because there's so much happening in our lives and there's so many touch points in our lives that we have to pay attention to, that sometimes something happens in our gut and we don't circle back to it until much later. And I think it's important to always listen to your gut. For me, the experiential learning that I had along the way aligned with my life experience and the leadership lessons. I didn't really believe that I was a leader until later on in my career. And then finally I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm a leader. I guess I will start really applying for leadership positions, a vice presidency, an EVP, a college president. I didn't do that until I was in my 40s and my 50s, because we're still in an era where women are thinking, well, I guess I will apply for a leadership position later. But usually that's still a male thing. The ceiling is definitely cracked. The ceiling is definitely cracked in more places than they were when I was coming through in the 60s and 70s, when I was coming through graduate school and so forth. But, it really needs to be shattered. And I can't even believe that now, in the era of Gloria Steinem and all of the other feminists before me, that we're still having to talk about that, but we are. So women need to continue to be brave, courageous, listen to their gut, put bookends on their day to make sure they take care of themselves. But more importantly, remember that the leadership capacity that we're seeing that we need locally, nationally, statewide, and internationally really begins with understanding that the power to lead begins with a reflection of the community and the reflection of the self. And just to continue that work by showing up every day, being present, listening, and understanding that that ethos of care, that relationship building, is central to everything that happens in change. And those things have been really important for me in the work that I do.
Absolutely. Well, you have been hearing from Dr. Kathleen Rose. She is the president of Gavilan College. And I'm Siobhan Lindley, Forbes contributor and CEO of Women Evolution. And so if you want to learn more, if you have questions for Kathleen that you didn't get answered here, or that really you would like to ask her, make sure and post your questions below. We're going to be doing a live Q&A 72 hours after the Forbes article went live. So if you haven't read the article, click the link right now to check it out. Also, do you know any other rising female leaders at any stage of their career? Earlier on, closer towards the later part of their career, whatever it may be, I'm interested in telling their story. And so follow the arrows at the top. There's an application to apply, so make sure you send it to any other rising leaders that you believe really embody what strong female authentic leadership looks and sounds like. So thank you again so much, and we will see you at the live Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you.